You're listening to Whoa! Potluck.
Hey everyone, you're listening to Books and Boba, a book club and podcast featuring books by Asian and Asian American authors. My name is Marvin Yue.
And my name is Rira Yu.
And it is July. Summer has officially started, has been started.
I think it's already started.
It's hot, but what a great time to stay indoors and read a book.
If you say so.
So I know a lot of you are expecting to hear our discussion of our June book club pick, Kafka on the Shore by Haruki Murakami, but we're going to be postponing that discussion for a little bit because
we just want to prepare a bit more for that episode.
Yeah. We understand that it's a very, I guess, it's, you want to be prepared to discuss your first Murakami, I guess.
I know. I'm a little bit scared to talk about it, but by the time we release this episode, hopefully I am a little bit more prepared to discuss it in front of a microphone. Yeah.
And also our schedules have been pretty whack lately, so we just need a little bit more time to get things ready for you.
Yeah.
And so sit tight for that. But Rira, since it is July 2019, what are we reading for this month?
So for this month, we're going to be switching things up and reading a sci-fi thriller. The book's title is Zero Sum Game, and it's written by S.L. Huang.
Yeah. I read a box quote on the back saying this is pretty much a math Jack Reacher type of story.
I mean, it's called Zero Sum Game. I expect some math to be involved. And also I read
could also be economics.
That is true. But
which is also math.
But S.L. Huang, I heard that she went to MIT and studied mathematics.
Okay.
And she's also like a stunt woman or like worked as a stunt woman. So
wow.
She's like probably the coolest person I've read about recently. So I am very curious as to like how her experiences have kind of like leaked into the book. But yeah, we haven't read a thriller in a while, so I am very excited. We do have an author interview prepared instead of our Murakami discussion. And in this episode, I talked to Misa Sugiura on her book, This Time Will Be Different.
Yeah, Rhea, tell us about This Time Will Be Different. What's it about?
This Time Will Be Different centers around a 17-year-old girl named CJ Katsuyama. And it's very interesting because it really dives into really complex issues like racism, sexism, white savior complex, and feminism, and really asks a lot of important questions about how we move forward with mistakes from the past, injustices of the past. So it centers around CJ Katsuyama, and she finds out that her mother is going to sell her family's flower shop, which has been in the family for generations. And she finds out that her mom is planning to sell the flower shop to the McAllisters. And the McAllisters, their family were the ones who kind of swindled the Katsuyamas when thousands of Japanese Americans were being sent to prison camps. And they had to sell their flower shop pretty quickly because the government was really just kind of pressuring Japanese American families to sell their properties before they got imprisoned. So the McAllisters, they pretty much bought the flower shop for nothing. Mm-hmm. And then after the Japanese Americans were released from these camps, the Katsuyamas wanted to buy back their shop, but the McAllisters, being the greedy capitalists that they are, they sell the flower shop at market price, which is much higher than than the Katsuyamas originally sold it for. So there's a bit of like a family grudge there. And CJ actually finds out later that the McAllisters, they swindled a lot of Japanese American families in the local area. And this kind of galvanized the community and some of her Asian American high school students into campaigning for their school, which is actually named after the McAllisters, to change their name, because they find out that actually the land that the high school's on belonged to a Japanese American farmer. So they kind of campaign for their school to be renamed after that farmer.
Wow.
So there's a lot going on in this book. There's a lot of diversity. You have a bunch of queer characters, a bunch of different Asian American characters from different backgrounds. And I think I finished a book and I personally really enjoyed it. And I hope you enjoy this conversation with Misa. Hi, everyone. I'm here with Misa Sugiura, the author of This Time Will Be Different. Hi, Misa. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm great. Great.
Okay.
How are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. I was really excited to talk to you today because I finished your book recently and I am so stoked to talk about it. So this is your second novel. I know that writing a second book, it can be a little bit more challenging than writing a debut book, especially if you're on a deadline.
Yes, it was. Well, so I actually missed my deadline by about a year and a half. My initial, my agent kindly said, like, just think of it as a suggestion. You know, she was trying to take the pressure off, but it ended up being me taking that literally. So, yeah, it was a 2-book deal, and the first draft was due in early 2017, and, yeah, I ended up getting it to my editor in the, fall of 2018. And I think that had a lot to do with, the kind of the paralysis that comes with having to do it again. And I spent a lot of time spinning my wheels and starting plots and starting stories and throwing them out. And eventually what I turned into my editor was just basically a pile of loosely connected scenes. And there was kind of a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I crossed my fingers and apologized. And that, and my editor, Stephanie Stein, was just amazing. And she took a look at it and said, here, this is what I think the heart of your novel is. And why don't you arrange the rest of it around that? And, and after that, it was just a matter of, I love revising. Once I have a clear direction, then, for me, no revision is too difficult. So far, I've been lucky. So yeah, it was really hard to write the first draft.
Oh, that's always the hardest part. So even though you missed your deadline, this book was so timely to me because it touched a lot of important issues and political issues that we face today, such as racism, sexism, white savior complex. But before we dive into all of that, I couldn't help but notice that in your acknowledgments, you wrote that you were inspired by your uncle's experience with Japanese Canadian internment. Can you talk more about that and what led you to write this book?
Yeah, so that experience for me was something that it was kind of almost an echo of earlier experiences I've had with Nisei, or with the people who came of age, I guess, in the camps. Often people of his generation, so in their 80s and 90s right now, didn't really, they didn't talk very much about the camps afterwards. And maybe even older. I'm thinking George Takei was pretty young, and he was part of the movement to get reparations in the 80s. But the people who were adults and young adults in the camps often just wanted to put that experience behind them. And there were people in my sort of found family, my parents' found family, who were like grandparents to me, who never spoke about being in the camps. And I only learned about it. I only realized that they had been in the camps at some point in high school when there was a paragraph about it in my history book. And they insisted like, oh, it was fine. It was no big deal. And we just, you just live through it. And it's that whole Japanese philosophy of shikataganai, right? That's just the way it is. You deal with it. And then my uncle, I should have put two and two together and realized that he too had been in the camps, because I knew he was Japanese Canadian and he was the right generation. But he never talked about it either. And and when he passed away, I was in the middle of struggling with this draft, and I was at his memorial service, and there were photos of him in the camps, and his mother had been a teacher. She taught second grade while they were interned, and I had never known his middle name, and his middle name, as it turns out, was Mackenzie, and he had been named after the Prime Minister of Canada, who eventually signed the order for Japanese Canadians to go to camps. And that I was just blown away. I was like, how did I live my entire life? I was in 40 something at that time, and no one ever told me this, and no one ever spoke of this. And my cousins too said, yeah, it's crazy. Like, I can't believe that it happened, and the irony is just so bitter and painful. And it was kind of a taboo topic of conversation, and they didn't know much about his experience either. And that made me start to think, like, someone needs to talk about it, but it's already been talked about in the sort of historical sense, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
And we were sitting there talking about, well, what did it mean for us, and what did it mean that he, how did that affect the rest of his life? And the power of knowing these things, even today, even though it happened so long ago, was the feeling I decided I wanted to write about.
Yeah, I feel like now the current generation of Japanese Americans, they're really digging into their grandparents and parents' past, and really taking this opportunity to to talk more about internment and how there are lingering effects from it. And it's not even just the lingering effects on the victims, but also the perpetrators, those who did advocate for the internment. And I really like that you delve into it. It's a very complicated and an ugly topic, because in your book you have the McAllisters, who who essentially they swindled a lot of Japanese Americans of their land and property and used it for their own personal gain. And I just want you to talk a little bit more about that plot line, if you can.
I think one of the inspirations for that was another thing that happened in shortly before I really got going on the draft was there were some controversies at some Ivy League colleges at Princeton and at Yale about buildings named after people who, we realized, they were actually really racist, or they were slave owners, or, and And even while I was drafting it, there was a school in Palo Alto which is close to where I live, where some child was doing a history project and realized that the man the school was named after was a eugenicist and was a really heavy proponent of sort of like weeding out the quote undesirable genetic elements, and believed that was sort of racism as a scientific fact. And so let's see. Yeah, so all of that had me really thinking about this feeling that, yes, the argument against these protesters at the Ivy League schools was yes, racism is terrible and slavery was terrible, but these men were great men. They did really great things, and can't we just put aside the anger and honor the great deeds that they did? And that argument has never quite, it doesn't sit right with me. I began to think about how that situation might sort of organically be transplanted into the Bay Area, which is where I wanted to set my story. And then my grandfather's memorial service sort of happened right as I was sort of mulling those issues over in my head. And the story was born from there. And it's interesting to me that Japanese Americans did own quite a bit of land. And in fact, I think almost right before the war, or right before they were sent to the camps, I think it was something like 70 or 80% of the agricultural economy of the West Coast was Japanese American farmers. And there's no sign of that. There's, maybe a florist here or a nursery there, and we don't see that at all.
Well, people often forget that Asian Americans have been here for a while, a number of generations. Yes,
exactly. And and so just this whole idea that we have these, these great white philanthropists and politicians and all this stuff that we name our schools after, and our streets and our buildings and our hospitals and our libraries, and we don't really dig into their pasts. And I thought that was something that was worth talking about. And
it definitely. So I'm from Georgia, and it definitely reminded me of the Confederate flag, and how there were protests about how the flag was disrespectful to Black families, and also how these statues are just really what was the point of having these statues of men who were for slavery, and how also their descendants, they're kind of not, in a way they are excusing their great grandparents. There's really no delicate way to put this, but their racism, saying that it was a different time, let bygones be bygones, and my great grandparents' sins or their failures, they don't really they're not my failures. And I really liked how your book really explored how do we move on from that? How do we carry those failures into the future? What can we do to forgive, and what can we do to make up for it? And that's kind of encompassed in your title. This time will be different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's an issue I've always kind of struggled with, how to express my point of view. You know what I mean? Like, crystallize it and explain it to people. And it was just, everyone was kind of, it was in the air at the time, because it was, by the time, when I was struggling with this draft, we were in the middle of the election, and then like in the early days of the Trump presidency. And so,
lots of inspiration to pull from.
I just thought someone needs to say something about this in a way that's not, and the other thing was that, I'm on Twitter fairly often, and, things blow up quickly on Twitter, and people get so angry and are just shouting at each other. And I wanted a way to talk about it in a way that wasn't just shouting and screaming. Like everybody was angry, right? Like, it didn't even matter whose side you were on at that point. Everyone was just angry with each other. And I felt like people I agreed with most were, no matter how cogent they were, and I just felt so much of the time we're all just shouting into the void. Online, it's just these like snappy, like one-liners, and it's hard to really delve into anything. And I wanted to have a chance to dig into things and really explore the issues and the questions in a medium that wasn't Twitter.
Well, books take much more efforts than writing 160 characters.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I did like about your book was how, like every other chapter, you kind of went into like this coda, and you kind of had like a timeline of what happened in like Asian American history on like immigration, the Exclusion Act, how like the internment, and how the model minority myth was made. And I'm sure like it was very educational for readers who are unfamiliar with that kind of history. Is there any like was that history something that you knew intimately, or was that something that you had to do your homework on?
I was pretty familiar with the history of the internment and some of the events, the Asian, the Chinese Exclusion Act. So I actually did my college thesis on literature, Japanese American literature from the internment. And it was a long time ago, but so I was familiar with all of that. So most of that was just kind of refreshing, going back and checking online to make sure I had my facts right. With the model minority myth, that was a lot of that was kind of a big revelation for me.
Because you really get specific with it too.
Yeah. I had no idea like the origins of it, and I began writing the book also partly as a way to push back on some of the stereotypes of Asian American girls and women in particular. But yeah, at some point I got curious and wondered like where did this come from? And yeah, I had no idea that this, that the government had made like public relations films about, Japanese Americans are doing so much better after the internment. Everything's fine, like kind of absolving themselves of any guilt or any crime that they had committed. And I didn't know about the Chinese American leaders kind of taking the opportunity in the 50s to sort of to promote Chinese American, I'm not sure what we can good citizenship. That was brand new to me. I hadn't heard of that before.
Yeah, it's something that I don't really see in a lot of YA books. Like we see characters who fit into the model minority myth, and characters now who don't meet that standard, and like the harmful effects of it. I thought you did a really good job, because like there is so much history involved, and it is such a sensitive topic. And I loved how CJ, like, she kind of had this have this complex about it, because she's not a hashtag winner, and she has a lot of insecurities about it. And it was something that was really relatable to me as someone who doesn't really fit into the model minority myth either. Was that something that you originally planned in CJ's character? Was that like originally like part of the first draft, knowing that like I want to write a character who doesn't fit into this myth, who feels these insecurities about it, because she does have a mother who kind of embodies that myth.
Yeah, for sure. That was definitely part of the plan, I guess. The very, very, very initial seed of the book was, I was thinking, a relationship between an Asian American girl who doesn't fit into that mold. And I hadn't really expected to have her feel weird about it. You know, initially I was just going to have this girl who was different from some, you know, from the sort of stereotypical Asian character. And so as it happens, I have an Asian American son who also doesn't fit into the mold. And and as I was writing this book, I became, and you know, it's been a thing where I've realized more and more how much I really actually did want him to fit. And in my brain, I've always thought, oh, I want my child to be whatever he wants to be. You know, whatever my children choose to pursue, I'm going to support it. And I found myself struggling with the fact that I actually wasn't 100% living my ideals. And and I saw him struggling with that too, with that conflict between the two of us. And that made me decide to put that aspect of CJ's character into the book as well. This idea that not only am I failing my parents, but I'm also failing this sort of societal expectation for kids who look like me.
I really do love the relationship between CJ and her mother, Mimi, and also her aunt, Hannah. It's an Asian American family that I haven't really seen a lot of in books, especially YA, because Mimi is a single mother and she's never been married, and CJ was an unplanned pregnancy, and like she calls her aunt by her first name. It's all very like very different to me, and I just really loved that. Like, you have these strong female characters who are so different from each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do too. It was the same sort of thing. I really wanted Mimi to, you know, exactly embody some of the things we expect of Asian American women of a certain age. Just, you know, the overachiever, driven, and I know so many women like that.
And it does come from a place of parental love. Just wanting your child to have all the opportunities that you didn't have, and to really, you know, kind of like maximize their abilities. I think that is not just like an Asian American thing. I think it's definitely like a parental thing of this generation. Teenagers nowadays, in Gen Z, there's so much pressure on them. There is so much pressure to succeed and to go to to do all these activities to make themselves look good for college applications.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you should know because you're a parent.
Yeah, no, it's bananas. Like, it's just, I hear about like parents who are encouraging their kids to become tuba players because there are, like, particularly Asian parents, because they want their, like, there's not that many tuba players. So if you can get really good at playing the tuba, maybe then you can get into this prestigious orchestra, and then you can whatever. And
I understand because I was an oboe player in high school.
Oh.
And my mom was like, "There's not that many oboe players. Like, it'll look good on your college resume." And then I went to college, and like literally 5 Asian girls that I became friends with, they all were oboe players in their local high schools.
Yeah, and the sort of this little cottage industry of, maybe it's even more than a cottage industry of counselors who tell you like what classes to take and what clubs to join, and like it's probably like that or everywhere, but Silicon Valley is incredibly. It feels really heightened around here.
Well, of course, with like all the tech companies and startup culture.
And exactly, and there's just such a high standard for, just for achievement. They had like our little local summer, the city-sponsored summer camps have like. There was one that was called like Little Doctors, or it might have even been like Little Pre-Med. And I was like, really? Like, I don't know. It's too much for me. So yeah, that was also part of that was in that book, just me pushing back a little bit against that.
What I really loved was your diversity of characters, and you had so many Asians in your book, and they were all so vastly different. You have CJ, who isn't a straight A student and kind of struggles with finding what she is good at, and you have people like M, who is doing a lot of leadership roles. You have biracial characters, and you also have queer characters. Was that an important aspect for you to write this? For you in writing this book, to make sure that you had a wide spectrum of Asians with different experiences and different levels of abilities, and also queer characters from different parts of the spectrum.
Yes, in the sense that I wanted to write an inclusive novel, but I'm also somebody who I feel like one reason I write contemporary is because my imagination is limited. Like I just want to make things as close to reality as possible. I mean, apart from the, sort of things that plots have to do sometimes. And in my community where I live and where I used to teach, that is the reality, where there are just a lot of different kinds of Asians. It's a very Asian heavy area around here, and there are not as many Asian teenagers are out of the closet, as I think, and there tend to be more white kids in the QSAs, even in high schools with a lot of Asians. But there are some Asians, and that was. So I just wanted to write a book that reflected the reality of where I live. So that's what that was.
I guess moving on, this book uses flower magic. And I was just curious, like, were you into flowers before writing the book, or was that something that you had to like go into like Wikipedia and do your research?
I had to do a lot of, there were 3 or 4 websites that I was constantly referring to. The flowers were part of the story kind of from the beginning, because I wanted to have a family business, and, that was growing flowers, like having nurseries and flower growing farms and florist shops was a space that Japanese Americans like sort of occupied in the early 20th century. And then from there, I actually don't even know how it happened. Maybe it was the aunt, she's sort of airy-fairy, and I thought, oh, this would be the perfect thing for her to love. And my mom had a pretty big flower garden when I was growing up, and so I know a lot of flowers and had my favorites and things like that as a kid. I myself cannot keep a plant alive, like, for the life of me. So, I kind of enjoyed really digging into, really thinking about the flowers and their meanings. And, in Japanese culture and in other Asian cultures too, a lot of flowers have different symbolic meanings. And, that was fun to sort of think about as well.
So one of the through lines in your book is CJ's teen pregnancy, and she does go and get an abortion. And maybe it's just me, because I would like to say that I have read a great deal of YA books, but I really haven't really seen abortion being talked about in a lot of books. And I think you did a great job with portraying CJ's like panic and vulnerability and just her state of paralysis when she's going through this time. And it was interesting for me as an adult reader reading those scenes, because obviously I don't know how it feels to be a teen who has an unplanned pregnancy. Was like, when you were writing those scenes, did you talk to any teenagers who have gone through this experience, or other women who have gone through abortions? Because it is a very sensitive topic.
Yeah, I did actually. So I had this, like, I knew that this was going to be something that happened to her. And I knew from the beginning that I wanted that she was going to get this abortion and not feel terrible about it. So that general idea came to me from Lindy West's book. I don't know if it was a book or a podcast, her book, Shrill, or maybe it was a podcast about it, where she talked a little bit about that, about this idea that the sort of dominant narrative of the pro-choice movement is that abortion is a really difficult and traumatic choice for people, so you shouldn't shame them for having an abortion. But then, there's this other thing that, like, it's not always difficult, and you shouldn't feel ashamed of that either, to make the decision anyway. Lindy West has a website, which I think it's called My Abortion. I don't know if it's .com or what, but anyway, there's a lot of, it's a space for women to write their stories. So I read a few of those, and I did actually speak with a couple women who had, Asian American women who were pregnant, as teenagers or very, very young, like 21, 22, young adults. And I took I put a lot of their experiences into CJ's experience.
It was also really nice that it was a conversation that CJ could have with her mother, who also faced that choice and took a different choice. She did decide to go with the unplanned pregnancy, and I really like that there was a contrast to that, and that it was something that could be talked about, and how she didn't pressure CJ into having to going through with the pregnancy. It is something that I don't really see a lot of in books, especially with Asian American characters. I feel like the subject of sex and pregnancy is kind of closed off for a lot of Asian American families.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I'm surprised that even some like second, third generation Asian families I know are kind of closed-mouthed about sex.
It's not so much of a taboo, but it just never really comes up.
Yeah, right. And yeah, it's just I don't know. Yeah, exactly. Like it's a little bit embarrassing, so why bring it up if you don't have to? And but yeah, I don't know. I've always tried to, like with my kids, like I just said, like I'm going to make sure they know everything that they need to know, and I make an effort to be open with them about sex. So I thought that, yeah, it would be nice to have a family that is like that, an Asian family.
Yeah, I really did like how that was a conversation that again, that like Mimi and CJ could have together, and that it wasn't something that I guess the way you portrayed it seemed more like this is a thing that happens, and it's not like it like you said, like abortion doesn't have to be a really difficult, traumatic decision. It could be something that is a very straightforward choice. So my last question is, I really loved Owen's shirts, his history buff shirts. I loved his his history videos that you wrote into the book, and I'm just wondering, because one of my favorite shirts that's described in the book, it has the quote, "If there's anything that the lessons of history have taught us, it's that people haven't learned the lessons of history." And I just want to know, did you come up with these slogans for the shirts, or are they something that like actually exist in real life? Because I would like to know where I can buy them.
No, I just Googled like history joke T-shirts.
Okay, great. And, so they exist.
And those came up. So, like the dinosaur one is on like Snorg tees. So, I wish I was that clever, but that was just Google.
So I guess like what's next for you? Or is there anything that you're working on now?
I'm working on a third book. I can't say a whole lot about it just yet, but it, I was kind of sort of emotionally drained after writing this one. This time will be different. So I guess what I can say is that the third book is going to be a little bit lighter, just a little heavier on the rom-com angle, and and I'm looking forward to having that come out. I don't know when that will be, but hopefully in the next year or two. Well, I don't know. I don't know.
Oh no, it's publishing. Publishing runs on its own time. I said that was going to be the last question, but I was lying. If there's one thing you want your readers to take away from This Time Will Be Different, what would you like it to be?
Yeah. I think, I think the main thing I want people to do is start asking themselves questions. Because I like to say about my own writing that I don't answer questions. I write my books because I just want to explore. And I would hope that readers would come away just sort of thinking about their own lives, whether it be on a personal level or, community level, or, if they're thinking about national issues, or, how can we deal with the injustices of the past, and whether we are the ones who committed the injustice or whether it was someone, from a long time ago. What responsibilities do we bear, both as the victims and as the perpetrators or the observers of injustice? I guess I want people to ask themselves that question. How do these.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us, Misa. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you. I've had a really great time.
And where can our listeners find you?
They can find me on Twitter at miscellaneous1. That's MISALLANEOUS1. And on Instagram at the same handle, at miscellaneous1. And I also have a website. That's just misasugiura.com.
All right. And that will be the end of, this talk with Misa Sugiura, the author of This Time Will Be Different.
And that was Rira's conversation with Misa Sugiura, the author of This Time Will Be Different. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. I'm actually super interested in checking this book out. Given our last episode's lengthy discussion on the situation surrounding No Boy, I think...
Yeah, the timing is kind of...
Yeah, and with just the current climate around literal detainment camps coming back to the public knowledge, I think...
Yeah, this book definitely reminded me of Angie Thomas's The Hate U Give. Mm-hmm. It's really nice to see books where teenagers who are social justice activists and them really tackling these really important issues in politics and also just their community. It's really, really nice because I feel like it reflects the reality of our country right now. Young people are doing so many incredible things, and they're at the forefront of so many movements right now.
Yeah, and it's important to know that history doesn't your life doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's the reason that we live or work wherever we are is the result of years and years of a lot of history happening, good and bad. So yeah.
I wish I could lend it to you, Marvin, but I read it on my Kindle. So I know I can lend it maybe 2 times on through digital, digital magic, but yeah.
It's all good.
Go buy your own copy.
Yeah, the book is on sale now at booksellers everywhere, so go check it out. The book again is This Time Will Be Different by Misa Sugiura. Check it out. And don't forget our July book club pick for Books and Boba is The Zero Sum Game by S.L. Huang. It's already locked and loaded on my Kindle, so I can't wait to check it out during my... I'm going out of town for a couple of weeks, so that's why we're postponing the Haruki Murakami discussion.
And I had just come back from New York, so it's just been a scheduling nightmare, guys. So thank you for your patience, and we will see you guys. Not see you guys. We will talk to you guys soon.
Yeah. If you do have thoughts about Kafka on the Shore and want to get it on our radar before our discussion, please let us know on our Goodreads forums. And yeah, like we said, that'll do it for this episode of Books and Boba. I wanted to give a quick shout out to the Potluck Podcast Collective, a collective of Asian American hosted podcasts that we're proud to be a part of. You can learn more about the collective and our fellow Potluck podcast shows by going to the website podcastpotluck.com. And also thanks to Visual Communications, the Potluck Podcast Studios is located within the Visual Communications offices in downtown LA. Thanks to VC for always providing us a space to record this podcast. And on that note, Vera, I'll see you next time to talk about this Murakami thing that we got ourselves into.
Yes. Oh my God, I'm so scared. But we will survive.
Okay.
Yes. All right. See ya.
Bye, everyone.
Hey, I'm Phil Yu, and you may know me from a blog called Angry Asian Man.
And I'm Jeff Yang, author, journalist, and celebrity dad.
We host a podcast called They Call Us Bruce, an unfiltered conversation about what's happening in Asian America.
Each week or so, we host a discussion about some of the most vital and interesting topics in our pop culture and our community, bringing in guests who are shaping and informing this thing called Asian America from Hollywood to DC and beyond.
We got media, entertainment, food, family, politics, representation.
The good, the bad, the WTF of it all.
So check us out wherever you get your podcasts or at theycallsbruce.com.
Peace.
Peace.